Part 44. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yun Suya. Chapter 431. Chapter 431 dedicated to Xia Ying. Xia Ying sat down next to him. It was the first time she was so close to Stefan. Although he is tall, Stefan is just a child after all, and his clear eyes still reveal innocence. The tiny fuzz on the upper lip indicates that the child is moving towards adolescence. Xia Ying turned her head and looked at him. "What are you playing?" Stephen said nothing, but lowered his head and played the prelude of Life is Like a Summer Flower on the keys. Xia Ying instantly understood that he wanted her to play the song with him. Good. Xia Ying agreed readily. Xia Ying has never played four-handed music with anyone else before. Unexpectedly, the first person to collaborate with her was Stefan, a talented music boy. Although the two have never collaborated before, they work together so well when it comes to music. Xia Ying herself didn't expect that her and Stefan's fit would be so perfect. It didn't look like a casual performance, but rather the result of long-term rehearsals. After playing the song, Xia Ying smiled and said to Stefan, "This song is actually more suitable for playing with four hands." Stefan nodded. Then she took the music score off the piano stand and turned to the title page. Xia Ying was stunned. The title page is written in somewhat crooked Chinese characters, dedicated to Xia Ying. Evidently he had practiced writing her name for a long time. So, this piece of music was written by Stefan for her? Xia Ying couldn't accept it for a while, and she didn't react for a long time. Stefan frowned, thinking that Xia Ying didn't like it, so he felt a little depressed. "Thank you, I like it very much." After hearing Xia Ying's words, Stefan's eyebrows relaxed. Xia Ying suddenly picked up the pen beside her and added the word Stefan before dedicated to Xia Ying on the title page. Stefan obviously didn't know those three words, so he looked at Xia Ying in confusion. Xia Ying explained patiently, "This is your name, Chinese name, Stefan." Stefan moved his lips and practiced these three words with a light flow of air. "Thanks." Stefan suddenly spoke, which surprised Xia Ying. Mordex and Xia Ying said that Stefan almost never spoke to anyone else except him. That's why Xia Ying was accustomed to Stefan's silence all the time. However, Xia Ying didn't expect that Stefan would actually say thank you to her. Just because she taught him how to pronounce his Chinese name. Stefan is indeed smart. He quickly learned the thank you that Xia Ying just said once, and he had almost no accent. He really surprised her. "You're welcome." Xia Ying replied with a smile. At night, Xia Ying returned to her room, holding the music score given to her by Stefan. Born like a summer flower, this name actually has something to do with her. Her name is Xia Ying. The reason why she is called this name is because Xia Chuanhai hopes that Xia Ying's life will be as colorful as cherry blossoms. Cherry blossoms symbolize love and hope, which are also Xia Chuanhai's hopes for Xia Ying. Born like a summer flower, this is where her name came from. It seems that Stefan really put a lot of thought into this piece of music. While Xia Ying was lying on the bed and meditating, suddenly the bell on her wrist rang, and Xia Ying immediately became vigilant. The ringing of a bell means there is danger. So, what danger is coming? Xia Ying sat up and looked at the dark room, trembling in her heart. Thanks to the little cutie, it's Li Shiki and Xingyu Chuxia for the reward. End of this chapter. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yun Suya. Chapter 432. Chapter 432 I'm leaving for a while. Xia Ying tiptoed to turn on the bedside lamp. However, before her hand could touch the switch, the next second she was trapped in a huge warm embrace. The familiar smell came to her one after another, and Xia Ying trembled slightly, realizing who the other person was. "Yu Lingfeng, why are you here?" Xia Ying asked. Yu Lingfeng didn't speak, but after hearing Xia Ying's voice, he reached out and hugged her tighter. "Yu Lingfeng, My bracelet just rang. Xia Ying's implication is that danger may be about to happen. Yu Lingfeng looked very calm. Xia Ying suddenly realized that after Yu Lingfeng appeared, the bracelet stopped ringing. So, the reason the bracelet rang just now was because of Yu Lingfeng? Just, in the little minds of the little goo insects, when did Yu Lingfeng be classified as dangerous? Xia Ying didn't think deeply about it because she was a little out of breath being held by Yu Lingfeng. Just as Xia Ying was about to ask Yu Lingfeng to let go of her, Yu Lingfeng suddenly spoke, "I want to leave for a while." Yu Lingfeng's words forced Xia Ying to hold back what she wanted to say. Where to? Xia Ying suddenly had a bad feeling. There is something, it may take a month, Yu Lingfeng continued. In other words, he might not see Xia Ying for a month. Then what you are doing is dangerous? Xia Ying asked in a low voice. No. Yu Lingfeng answered quickly. Then I'll wait for you to come back. Xia Ying said, trying to calm down her tone so as not to let Yu Lingfeng notice the slight sense of loss in her heart. Yeah, Yu Lingfeng nodded, I will do it as soon as possible. Yu Lingfeng let go of Song Xia Ying, but still imprisoned her in his arms, as if she would leave as soon as he let go. Why didn't you call me? When Yu Lingfeng said this, he seemed to be having a bad temper. Although Xia Ying has just arrived in Austria, Yu Lingfeng has been waiting for her call. He thought that he would at least get one, but she didn't. I was too tired, so I didn't fight. Xia Ying explained, but I have plans to fight tomorrow. Yu Lingfeng curled his lips and said nothing, but just blinked at Xia Ying with a pair of glass-like eyes. At this time, there was thunder outside. Xia Ying subconsciously shrank into Yu Lingfeng's arms. Yu Lingfeng also took advantage of the situation and hugged Xia Ying and asked her in a low voice, "Are you afraid of thunder?" It's not that she is afraid of thunder, but when she hears thunder subconsciously, she will remember that in her previous life, she was framed by Xia Menjian, taught a lesson by Mu Niankai and others, and then died alone with bruises all over her body. There was a thundering rainy night outside, which was the most painful memory of her previous school days. Even though she is reborn now, many things have changed, but her memory is still there, and those memories are still there. Yu Lingfeng saw that Xia Ying didn't answer. She just shrank tightly into his arms and stretched out her arms to hug him. This action said everything. I'm going to close the window. Yu Lingfeng said. Xia Ying nodded. Yu Lingfeng stood up and walked to the window sill. However, through the window, he saw the crowds of people coming and going in a hurry outside, and suddenly frowned. Yu Lingfeng closed the window, then walked towards Xia Ying on the bed and said, something seems to have happened outside. Ah, it's Wen who got stuck here, it has nothing to do with me / sincere face / In addition, the male protagonist has a lot of drama behind him, so don't worry, ha ha ha. He has been living like a soy sauce male protagonist who has no drama to worry about because of the cute readers. Thank you to the little cuties and how kui and prosperity like a cocoon and gone away for the reward. This chapter will be updated if 200 have been commented. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuan Suya. Chapter 433. Chapter 433 Genius Autism. After hearing this, Xia Ying sat up from the bed and asked puzzledly, what happened? I don't know, there are a lot of people outside, coming in and out, and everyone's face looks very panicked. Yu Lingfeng described. Xia Ying suddenly had a bad premonition, so she put on her windbreaker and walked out of the room. When Xia Ying came to the living room was full of people, and everyone had a worried look on their face. Xia Ying also noticed that many doctors and nurses were walking towards Stefan's room, coming in and out, and there were beads of sweat on everyone's forehead due to anxiety. Xia Ying walked up to Ma Zai and asked him what happened. Mordersi sighed heavily and explained, Stefan's old habit has returned. An old problem. Xia Ying was even more puzzled, what's the old problem? This child will be like this when it rains. It's just that today his mood seems to be particularly out of control and he can't calm down. The psychiatrist has no choice but to give him a sedative. But he keeps crying, even me I don't want to see him anymore. After Ma Zai finished speaking, he let out a long sigh. Xia Ying frowned slightly in distress, and then walked towards Stefan's room. Stefan's room is closed and his psychiatrist is communicating with him. Stephen has several psychiatrists, and he is usually quite cooperative with the counseling provided by these doctors, but today he was out of control, and no one could calm him down. Xia Ying heard from the servants on the side that Stefan almost jumped from the window just now, but fortunately they found out and stopped him in time. Stephen lives at Modzi's house. Because of his special situation, his psychiatrist follows him all the time and will treat him whenever there is a special situation. No one except the doctor can get close to Stefan now, and Xia Ying doesn't know how he is doing now. However, Xia Ying couldn't help but feel distressed when she thought of Stefan's childlike eyes mixed with sadness. He was obviously just a child, why did he become like this and bear such psychological pressure? Xia Ying sat in the living room, listening to Ma Zai tell him about Stefan. Xia Ying also learned some things about Stefan from Ma Zai that she had already guessed. Stefan is a patient with Asperger's syndrome, also known as genius autism. But fortunately, unlike most autistic geniuses, Stefan has the ability to take care of himself, and in normal times, his performance is almost the same as that of ordinary people. He just lives in his own world and doesn't want to communicate with others. Apart from his parents, the only person Stefan has communicated with is Ma Zai. Of course, Xia Ying also had a brief communication with him. People like Stefan have never had friends since he was a child. His parents tried everything they could to treat his disease, but the disease was almost incurable. But when God closed one door for him, it also opened another door for him. Stefan is a rare genius with autism. His musical acumen has been demonstrated since he was 4 years old. At that time, he just overheard a piano piece, and then he memorized it completely and played it completely in front of the piano. It was also from that time that Stefan's parents discovered his extremely high talent for music and began to gradually cultivate Stefan on the road of music. Autism is also called Asperger's syndrome. I recommend the movie Rain Man to everyone, which is about Asperger's syndrome. Stefan is one of the luckier ones. His usual behavior is no different from that of ordinary people, except that he has social anxiety. End of this chapter. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuen Suya. Chapter 434. Chapter 434 Use goo insects to help him. When Stefan was a child, he once had a pet dog, which was his only good friend. Stefan's first laugh in his life was also brought by this dog. But the good times didn't last long. On a rainy night, Stefan witnessed his dog running towards him, but was hit and killed by a car on the road. That night, Stefan collapsed. He kept crying and fussing, and no one could comfort him. He kept saying 2 words, blood and death. His best friend left him just like that, and even after all these years, Stefan has not forgotten it. Every rainy night, he would think of the dog's corpse and its dying eyes. Xia Ying's whole body became paralyzed as she listened to Ma Zai's story. Xia Ying sat on the sofa with a pale face, and Stefan's noise in the room could be heard clearly even in the living room. Xia Ying couldn't stand it anymore, so she turned around and returned to her room. When Xia Ying opened the door and went in, Yu Lingfeng was still there. Xia Ying raised her face and asked Yu Lingfeng, is there anything you can do to help Stefan? He is a genius autistic patient, can you help him recover? Yu Lingfeng met Xia Ying's expectant eyes and shook his head very unbearably. I can only deal with physical wounds, but mentally, I am powerless. Xia Ying heard what Yu Lingfeng said, and the little hope in her heart was extinguished. Yu Lingfeng saw Xia Ying's appearance, reached out and touched her head, and said softly, everyone's life is destined to be different, and you can't interfere. Yu Lingfeng was right, but Xia Ying wanted to help him in her heart. Xia Ying and Stefan were not close friends, maybe it was because of the mutual sympathy between the music, but Xia Ying couldn't bear to see him like this. In her last life, she had no interaction with Stefan, but in this life, Stefan became her junior brother by accident. Maybe something will change somewhere? Xia Ying lowered her eyes and fell on the bracelet bell on her wrist. Xia Ying's eyes suddenly lit up, and then she said to the little bugs in the bracelet, little guys, can you help Stefan? Hearing Xia Ying's voice, the little goo insects stuck out their little heads, but when they saw Yu Lingfeng in front of them, they shrank back in horror. Xia Ying looked at Yu Lingfeng in confusion, and then said, Yu Lingfeng, they seem to be afraid of you. Yu Lingfeng looked as if nothing had happened. Is there any? Maybe it's because he had threatened these little things before and said he would kill them more than once, so they left a shadow. You want to use goo insects to help Stefan, this will be very dangerous. Yu Lingfeng continued, you little bugs can only possess the master and can't help Stefan at all. Xia Ying disagreed, that's true, but I can give it to Stefan. At that time, Stefan will become its owner, so I can help him. It's not that easy for a bug to recognize its owner. But they have to obey their master's orders, right? Xia Ying retorted. Yu Lingfeng opened his mouth and was convinced by her. Then, which one do you want to give him? Yu Lingfeng had no choice but to ask. Xia Ying looked at the little bugs and carefully recalled the abilities of the little bugs that she tested one by one that day. By the way, which one can make people calm down and have good dreams? Xia Ying suddenly had an inspiration. Thanks to the little cutie for the reward. In PK, please vote for recommendation. End of this chapter. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuan Suya. Chapter 435. Chapter 435 Asleep. As soon as Xia Ying finished speaking, the smallest little goo insect flew out of the team. Xia Ying looked at it with joy on her face. Ha, it's up to you, Xiaju. From today on, Stefan will be your new master. Every night from now on, you must let him have a good dream. Little Gu Chong blinked his eyes and reluctantly circled around Xia Ying several times before slowly leaving. Xia Ying stretched out her index finger, touched the little goo insect's body, and said softly, don't worry, if you miss me, you can come over to see me at any time, and you can come over to play with your brothers and sisters at any time. Xiaju blinked her eyes in agreement, then approached Xia Ying's cheek and rubbed it reluctantly. The other 8 little goo bugs lined up in a row and winked at it in unison. Xiaoju was very reluctant to part with Xia Ying, but she couldn't disobey her master's order, so she had no choice but to fly silently to the direction of Stefan's room. Stephen is still dealing with a room full of psychiatrists. His tears are almost dry and his throat is almost hoarse from crying. But he was still crying heartbrokenly. Stefan's parents, who had just arrived, looked at their son's appearance heartbrokenly, but they were helpless. Sometimes, as parents, we don't really expect our children to be smart or promising at all, especially Stefan's parents. They actually just want him to be an ordinary child. It's just that such a seemingly simple wish is so difficult for them. Autism has made Stefan's music possible, and it has also ruined Stefan's original life. Xiaju looked around at his new master. He was a delicate and charming boy like a little prince. Xiaoju had a good impression of him when they first met, but such a cute and handsome little prince cried so heartbreakingly that Xiaoju drooped his wings and couldn't bear it. So, Xiaoju flew directly towards Stefan's head and attached to his body. Stefan's body trembled, and the crying stopped suddenly. Everyone in the room was stunned, staring at Stefan intently. Then, they saw Stefan's eyelids getting heavier and heavier, and finally, Stefan leaned back and fell asleep on the sofa. Fell asleep. Everyone was shocked. Stefan, who had been crying uncontrollably just now, and no one could persuade him, and no one was allowed to get close, suddenly calmed down and fell asleep in the next second. Without any warning, he fell asleep so quickly. You must know that even on normal days, Stefan will not go to bed before 2 o'clock in the night, and the quality of his sleep is very poor, and the slightest disturbance can wake him up. And as long as he is woken up, he will never be able to sleep again. But now, Stefan's sleeping face is so clear and sweet, as if he is sleeping soundly. When everyone saw this, they knew that he was always a light sleeper, so they didn't dare to wake him up, so they had to take a blanket to cover him, and then a group of people quietly left Stefan's room. When the door to Stefan's room was opened, Xia Ying happened to be standing outside the door. Looking at Stefan sleeping peacefully on the sofa, Xia Ying raised the corners of her lips and smiled. Stefan gave her a song, "Life is like a summer flower," and she gave him a little bug that promotes sleep, which was considered a reciprocation. Thanks to the little cuties Anruo Yuixi, Princess Fan, Songmiling, Madman and me, Izumi, Forget Me Not, what a reward. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuan Suya. Chapter 436. Chapter 436 Bizarre Case. When Xia Ying returned to the room again, Yu Lingfeng was already ready to leave. Xia Ying looked at Yu Lingfeng with her obsidian eyes and asked in a low voice, "Yu Lingfeng, can you tell me what you are going to do?" Xia Ying looked at Yu Lingfeng expectantly. If she knew what Yu Lingfeng was going to do, she would not worry about him in vain. A bizarre case happened in Ji City. Song Yang was sent to investigate the case. He asked me to go over and help him. Yu Lingfeng replied. The local police station investigated this case for a long time without making any progress. Officer Song finally asked for help. But even Officer Song was helpless. He had to pin his last hope on Yu Lingfeng. This was not a simple case. Rong Ci also heard about the case and sneaked over to see the body. The death was tragic, and the murderer left no clues. It could be considered a perfect crime, at least no breakthrough has been found so far. But more importantly, this corpse reminded Rong Ci of the shadow of his childhood. Rong Ci insisted that the murderer was a witch, but he didn't have any evidence. Just relying on his memory and his knowledge of the witch, he concluded that the murderer was the witch. Other than her, it is difficult to find such a brutal and invisible means of committing crimes in the world. Don't worry, I will come to you after it's taken care of. Also, you can call me at any time. Yu Lingfeng said, reached out and touched Xia Ying's head, opened the door and left. Xia Ying was stunned in place, and it took her a long time to realize that Yu Lingfeng had left. She was the only one left in the empty room. At the moment just now, she suddenly felt that Yu Lingfeng had left her forever. When did she become so sensitive and care about Yu Lingfeng? Tang Guo has come to China. When Chu Sensiu received the text message, his whole body felt empty. He has been rehearsing for a long time how to explain clearly to Tang Guo in the past few days. He had already thought of plan A and plan B, but when the day came, Chu Sensiu's mind was just blank. It's really annoying. However, what needs to be faced still needs to be faced. The two of them have not contacted each other for a long time, and they have never exchanged simple greetings such as good morning. Tang Guo had always been the one taking the initiative before, but from that day on, Tang Guo no longer took the initiative to find topics. Their contact gradually broke off. Until now, when Tang Guo returned to China, they were about to fulfill an agreement they had made long ago and have a meal together. Having a meal is such a simple thing, but for Chu Sensio at this moment, it is tantamount to going to the execution ground. On the one hand, he didn't want to hurt Tanguo's feelings and wanted to continue to be friends with her, but on the other hand, he didn't want Tanguo to have any inappropriate thoughts towards him. Life is really not easy. Chu Sensio simply packed up and prepared to go out. In the living room, Chu Shengming slowly raised his eyes and glanced at Chu Sensio, and said lightly, "A date. It's just a meal." Chu Sensio Ying. Tanguo. Chu Sensio said angrily, "Brother, how come you know everything? I guessed it by looking at your expression." Chu Shengming said slowly, "It's a rare time for you to go out, and you sprayed your hair with gel and changed into new clothes, but you have a constipated expression on your face. There are various signs that you are going on a date, and the person is Tanguo. Thanks to the little cutie alone for the beauty in the world and Yeajia Junjia for the rewards." End of this chapter. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuen Suya. Chapter 437. Chapter 437, Pinch your own peach blossoms yourself. Chu Sensio took a deep breath and worshipped, "Brother, I know you are powerful, so you must know how troubled I am at this moment." Chu Shengming said nothing, but slowly pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses and glanced at Chu Sensio indifferently. Chu Sensio suddenly had an idea, raised the corners of his mouth, showed a malicious smile, and approached Chu Shengming. Chu Shengming realized something was wrong and subconsciously moved back. Chu Sensio had already sat next to Chu Shengming, and said with a cheerful smile, "Brother, why don't you help me keep the appointment?" Chu Shengming rolled his eyes at him, "What nonsense are you thinking about all day long?" Chu Sensio curled his lips innocently, "Brother, you also know me. I am such a soft-hearted person. I really can't bear to see little Candy sad." Chu Shengming glanced sideways at Chu Sensio, "Are you saying that I am cruel?" "No, no, no, of course not." Chu Sensio waved his hands quickly and said in a dog-legged manner, "Brother, you are engaged in research. You are much more rational than me. You never deal with things in a muddled way, so I believe you, brother." As Chu Sensio spoke, he clenched his fists and looked like he was cheering Chu Shengming on. Chu Shengming calmly dismissed Chu Sensio's pretentious gesture and replied calmly, "There's no point in flattering. You have to pinch yourself." When Chu Sensio heard Chu Shengming's determination, he immediately felt aggrieved. He raised 4 fingers and said sincerely, "I'm so mad, I really didn't offend her. I don't know why she is the first person she has ever seen before. He's had a crush on me since we met." Chu Shengming glanced at Chu Sensio's handsome face and said, "You'll know after you look in the mirror." Sensio looked up to the sky helplessly, with a solemn expression, "There is no justice, even my brother won't help me." Chu Shengming said quietly, "I have been helping you since you were a child. I can't help you with this kind of thing. You have to learn to solve it yourself. How did you pinch the peach blossoms before? Just do it?" Chu Sensio was stunned. Before. In the past, he had always used cold violence to solve the problem, ignoring her and asking her to give up on her own initiative. Therefore, in the eyes of the people of country S, he has the image of a cold and aloof male god. But Tanguo was different from those rotten peach blossoms before. Tanguo was so cute and kind. Chu Sensio wanted to be good friends with her, and didn't want to make the relationship so tense. So, obviously his previous approach will not work. "Brother, I beg you, can you just study this matter as a social proposition?" Chu Sensio continued, "The name of this proposition is how to successfully convert suitors into good friends." Chu Shengming raised his eyebrows, which seemed interesting. Chu Sensio saw Chu Shengming lowering his eyes and hesitated. When he saw something was going on, he immediately felt happy. "Ha ha ha," he is still smart and knows that as long as the word research is mentioned in anything, his brother will definitely be interested. Chu Shenming moved his throat, glanced at Chu Shenxiu who was staring at him expectantly, and said slowly, "I can give it a try." "Yes." Chu Shenxiu immediately became excited. "Brother, you are so generous. Your research will definitely be successful." Chu Shenming ignored him and turned around to go out. As if Chu Shenxiu thought of something, he quickly chased after him. "Brother, wait a minute, you still need something. I am an author who enjoys doing things. Since your ability to refresh the screen is so great, this time 500 comments in this chapter will be added. Remember to vote for recommendation. We are still in PK. Good night." End of this chapter. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuan Suya. Chapter 438. Chapter 438, Being Single by Strength. Chu Shenming turned his head, and Chu Shenxiu slapped a hat on his head. Chu Shenming after putting on the hat is indeed very similar to Chu Shenxiu. We have different hair colors, so we need to disguise ourselves. Chu Shenxiu looked at Chu Shenming in front of him with satisfaction and said. Chu Shenming looked up with disgust at the hat that blocked half of his sight and was quite inconsistent with his artistic style. He couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Should he suspect that this guy did it on purpose? At most half an hour. Chu Shenming said lightly after looking at the date place Chu Shenxiu gave him. Chu Shenxiu opened his mouth, and it took him a long time to make a surprised sound. "Brother, in half an hour, do you want to go straight to the topic?" Chu Shenming disagreed. "Why don't we greet our parents and talk about today's weather?" Chu Shenxiu swallowed silently. Why did he suddenly feel that asking his brother to go there for him was a very unwise act? Is his brother, a weirdo who spends less time with unrelated people of the opposite than he spends time in the bathroom? Sure, he can handle Tanguoer. Chu Shenxiu silently offered incense to Tanguoer in his heart. He regretted it the next second, but Chu Shenming had already left the house vigorously. Chu Shenxiu crossed himself on his chest and said silently, "Little Candy, brother, I'm sorry for you." Chu Shenming was wearing a camel-colored windbreaker and a low-peaked cap. He took off his glasses and drove all the way to the date. A restaurant with a simple style. When Chu Shenming was walking towards the restaurant, he had already spotted Tanguoer's figure in front of the glass window. Although Chu Shenming had never met the so-called Tanguoer in person and only heard about it from Xia Ying and Chu Shenxiu, he probably knew what kind of girl she was. Chu Shenxiu once described to Chu Shenming, "She is a small, cute, and sweet Japanese girl with long black hair draped over her shoulders. Her speech is soft and waxy, and her smile is as sweet as candy. Although she is very talented in music, she is still like a child in her daily life. She does not understand many things and cannot do many things." Chu Shenming immediately said silently after hearing this, "Isn't he just a silly person?" Chu Shenxiu. His brother is single because of his strength. Chu Shenming walked towards the table where Tanguoer was sitting. Tanguoer was holding a cup of coffee at the moment, with his head lowered and thinking about something. His lower lip was biting tightly, as if he was very nervous. The sound of Chu Shenming sitting down made Tanguoer raise his head suddenly. When Tanguoer's dark and clear eyes met Chu Shenming's gaze, Chu Shenming suddenly frowned. Why does this girl look so familiar? The girl who bumped into him at the Imperial Music Hall during Xia Ying's last competition. It turns out that she is Tanguoer, and this world is really small. Chu Shenxiu, long time, I haven't seen you. Tanguoer didn't understand why Chu Shenxiu was wearing a low-down hat, and for some reason, Tanguoer always felt that today's Chu Shenxiu was strange. Although the person is still the same person, it is hard to tell what is different. Chu Shenxiu seems to be much calmer than before. Chu Shenming just responded lightly, then lowered his head and started to read the menu. Tanguoer frowned, her voice seemed different. The voice now sounds more magnetic and mature. Haven't seen each other for a while, could it be that the pronunciation of Chu Sensiu has changed again? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuan Suya. Chapter 439. Chapter 439. Do you think I'm annoying? Chu Shenming noticed that Tang Guo'er had been staring at him, so he raised his eyes to meet her gaze and asked, "Is there any problem?" Tang Guo'er was stunned for a moment. It seemed impolite to keep staring at others, so she shifted her gaze and replied in a low voice, "No, I just feel that you are different today." "What's the difference?" "My voice, demeanor, and dressing style all seem to have changed." Tang Guo'er continued. "But obviously, that face is still the same face, it hasn't changed. Is it getting better or worse?" Chu Shenming asked slowly and leisurely. "Well, it's getting better." Tang Guo'er replied in a low voice. The corners of Chu Shenming's mouth raised, revealing an inadvertent smile. Chu Shenming was looking at the menu, and Tang Guo'er was still looking at him furtively. The demeanor is completely different. Except for this face, the person in front of him is completely different from the previous Chu Sensiu. "Do you have something to tell me?" Chu Shenming looked at the menu and said without raising his head. He had no intention of having dinner with her. Once he made the matter clear, his mission would be completed. "Ah!" Chu Shenming's sudden words made Tang Guo'er feel at a loss. She did have something to say, and she had been brewing something just now. However, she still hadn't figured out how to speak. More than a month ago, she thought that she would confess her love to Chu Sensiu next time she saw him. However, as they got along slowly, she found that her feelings for Chu Sensiu gradually faded away. Maybe this is the disadvantage of falling in love at first sight, falling in love with a face, but in the days after contact, you gradually find that this person is different from what you originally thought. It's not that the person is bad, it's that your previous expectations are different from the person's reality. You just fall in love with the soul of the person you expect to see under this body, but he may not be what you think. Chu Sensiu is of course a good person and a good partner, but he is just not the other half that Tang Guo'er expected. "I'll have something to do later." The meaning of Chu Shenming's words implied that Tang Guo'er should seize the time. "Oh, okay." Tang Guo'er pursed her lips and continued, "I skipped a grade. If nothing happens in the second half of next year, I should go to Imperial University to study." Chu Shenming answered calmly. Daidu University is one of the best schools in China, but Tang Guo'er had always attended a conservatory of music before. People thought that her university would also be a specialized conservatory of music. The art department of Daidu University is very famous because the predecessor of Daidu University was the merger of Daidu University of Arts and Daidu Capital University. This has resulted in this comprehensive university integrating art and academics. Of course, the admission score is also extremely high. Those who can enter Daidu University are either top academics in academia or talents in the art world. "Chu Sensiu, do you think I'm annoying?" Tang Guo'er finally asked what he had always wanted to ask. Chu Sensiu usually exchanged words with her when chatting with her, but it was even more obvious today. He didn't even look at her during the whole process. Could it be that she was too enthusiastic before, which disgusted him? Tang Guo'er couldn't help but feel a little panicked by this thought in her heart. "No." Chu Shenming's tone was still calm. "Don't worry, I won't pester you to chat with you again." Chu Shenming moved his fingers, raised his eyes, and looked at Tang Guo'er meaningfully. Just at this glance, Tang Guo'er's heartbeat suddenly accelerated again. She seemed to have the same heartbeat feeling she had when she saw Chu Sensiu for the first time. Although the two people look very similar, their eyes are definitely different. That little tease Chu Sensio definitely can't compete with his cold-blooded brother. Chu Sensio, raised sword, black face author, say it again, I give you permission to rearrange the language. Xiao is going berserk. End of this chapter. The Return of the National Goddess. Author, Yuan Suya. Chapter 440. Chapter 440, The person I met that day was Chu Shengming. Tang Guo'er was confused for a moment. What had happened to her? She had obviously made up her mind to let go, so what was the panic at this moment? How could she be so worthless? We can still be friends. Chu Shengming said calmly. Tang Guo'er nodded, pursed her lips, and her heartbeat was still erratic. I have something to go. Chu Shengming stood up and left after saying this. Tang Guo'er has been sitting there, silently watching Chu Shengming's back. It's so strange. Today's Chu Sensio is really strange, as if he has changed into a different person. After Chu Shengming left the restaurant, he looked at his watch. It was 29 minutes and there was no time out. Chu Shengming took out his mobile phone and dialed Chu Sensio's number. The proposition is completed, I'm going to the research institute. Chu Sensio on the other end of the phone was stunned for 2 seconds, and then before Chu Shengming hung up the phone, he quickly asked, What? Brother, do you mean to say that you have convinced little Candy to be friends with me? Have you not hurt anyone's heart? No. So easy. Compared to Chu Sensio's excitement, Chu Shenming's face was indifferent. Could it be that little Candy realized something was wrong, for example, that you are not me? Chu Shengming frowned. Although he didn't know where Chu Sensio had so many questions, he still answered them one by one. Should, no. Ha. Brother, if you use such a non-committal tone, you must have exposed something. Chu Sensio began to brainstorm. It seems that little Candy is not stupid. He must think that something's wrong, he's not as handsome as usual. When Chu Shengming heard this, he hung up the phone impatiently. Who gave Chu Sensio the courage? Chu Shengming had just hung up the phone and was about to leave when a soft female voice sounded behind him. Chu Shengming. Chu Shengming paused, and the leg he just stepped out immediately retracted. This voice is Tang Guo'er. It's just that what she just shouted was his name. Chu Shengming. Tang Guo'er tentatively shouted again. The young man in front stopped, which meant that her guess was not wrong. The person coming today is not Chu Sensio, but his twin brother Chu Shengming. Tang Guo'er also just had suspicions. He searched Chu Sensio on Baidu and found out in his Baidu encyclopedia that he had a twin brother Chu Shengming. However, there are no related photos of Chu Shengming on the internet. Chu Shengming's Baidu encyclopedia contains a long list of medical achievements, including what he invented and what medicines he made. And I mentioned that he is Chu Sensio's twin brother. Unlike people like Chu Sensio who have a lot of photos on the internet, Chu Shengming does not have any photos on the internet. Almost no one knows what he looks like. How similar he is to Chu Sensio is unknown to others. However, Tang Guo'er was also surprised. Even if they are twins, these two people are too similar. Chu Shengming turned around and met Tang Guo'er's somewhat panicked gaze. You know everything. Chu Shengming opened his mouth slightly, and then took off his hat. Tang Guo'er's pupils dilated instantly, and memories flooded towards her like a tide. It turned out that the person she met that day was Chu Shengming, not Chu Sensio. Thanks to the little cutie Yejia Junjiu, 72, Lin 11 and 11 Mo. Best reward. End of this chapter.